All right, hello, my wisdom literature students. I wanted to make a short video on Ecclesiastes because you're working through Ecclesiastes. And I wanted to just say a few, hopefully, clarifying things about it. Ecclesiastes is probably one of my favorite Old Testament books because there's so much interesting stuff in it. On one hand, it's very dark, but I think it's a fascinating book. Now, the fundamental thing I want to emphasize in this short video is that most scholars, when they look at Ecclesiastes, they do not think there's any kind of real clear structure to it. They mostly treat it as just kind of like a haphazard collection of stuff that's thrown together, and there's no discernible literary structure to the whole thing. And if you know, if you've ever tried to read anything, understanding the literary structure of anything you read is kind of important. You need the structure to understand the content, and that's what makes the Ecclesiastes sometimes kind of frustrating, because even scholars don't think there's a clear literary structure. Well, I kind of think there is. I've always wanted to write an article on this, and maybe someday I will. But I wanted to share with you my thoughts on how Ecclesiastes fits together and what are some of the major themes that fit together. I'll just show you really quick. This is what I've been working. Years ago I did this. I kind of plotted out Ecclesiastes, like chapter by chapter, what it was talking about, highlighting similarities and stuff. So I have a lot of paper like this to kind of show, as I try to work through how I see Ecclesiastes fit together. Here's how I see it basically fitting together. You have, and you could write this down on your own. It looks, you can do it like this. It's a very, I think, subtly but concretely organized book. Chapter 1, 1 through 11 is like the general prologue. That is where the writer introduces himself as a Solomon-like figure, and kind of states the basic thesis of the Ecclesiastes is that life is a breath of breaths. We talked about this in the homework. I don't agree with translations that translate that Hebrew word hevel as meaningless. It's not a nihilistic book. He's not saying life is meaningless. At the same time, he's not saying life is vain, vanity of vanities. The Hebrew word hevel means breath. It's the same in Hebrew. It's Abel, as in Cain and Abel. Why is that guy named Abel? Because his life was cut short. That's the idea. So the thesis of Ecclesiastes is, because life is fleeting, because life is a breath, how you live your life is kind of important. Okay? If you live your life trying to attain wisdom and being smart and things, you can't take those with you. You're always going to be frustrated. And in a way, we kind of always know that. By contrast, he says, if you just learn to accept the gifts you've been given, the life you have, and find joy in that, even though you're going to die, that's what God wants you to do. And therefore, if you step back and reflect on that, that is kind of true. Think of the times you were most frustrated in life. You're doing this, you're doing your classwork, and sometimes you get down with your classwork because I just want to graduate from college and then I'll get a real job and then I'll be happy. If you're always reaching out for that something more and only then you'll be happy, you think, when you get there, guess what? You're not always going to be happy, because that thing is not going to bring you complete fulfillment as long as you're looking off into the future. It's almost kind of like what Yoda tells Luke, always looking off into the future and never focusing on where you are now. In a way, that's kind of what Ecclesiastes is about. Okay? So, Genesis. Chapter 1, 1 through 11 is the general prologue. The next chunk that I see starts in 1:12 and it goes all the way to the end of chapter 3, 3:22. That kind of tells us of Koheleth, the teacher's quest for wisdom, okay, and what he's trying to find out what is good. He tries to do all these things, and his conclusion at the end of chapter 3 is life is a breath. Those things in and of themselves is not going to bring you fulfillment. When you reach out for wisdom, the more wisdom you get, the more you realize that life is full of disappointment. Okay, so that's the second chunk. Then after that, the two major chunks in the middle is 4 through 6. I see 4 through 6 as a chunk, and even though there's a lot of individual things in those chapters, if you read 4 through 6, you realize the overwhelming push in those chapters is the writer's thoughts and contemplations about oppression and evil. If you read 4 through 6, notice how many times that topic comes up. Oppression and evil. So everything in 4 through 6 kind of falls under that rubric. So you have the general prologue, a little narrative of the teacher's quest for wisdom, and then a big chunk that focuses on oppression and evil. Then, starting in chapter 7, going to chapter 10, verse 15, if you read that chunk, that really focuses on contrasting wisdom and folly. And that's kind of a lot what we see in Proverbs. But if you read that passage, even though there's a lot of individual things in there, those themes, that theme of wisdom and folly is predominant in that chunk that isn't in the other chunk. Okay? After that, then you have chapters 10, verse 16 to 12:8 is kind of the balance to the teacher's quest for wisdom. And in this section, 10:16 to 12:8, it is the teacher's conclusion about life and God. Okay? So, and then at the end, there's the epilogue in chapter 12, 9 through 14. So what you see is a very parallel, balanced structure to Ecclesiastes. 1 through 11, balancing, that's the prologue, balancing with 12, 9 through 14, the epilogue. 1:12 to 3:22 is the teacher's quest for wisdom, parallels to 10:16 to 12:8, the teacher's conclusion about life and God. And in the middle, you have the two chunks about contemplating oppression and evil and contemplating wisdom and folly. I think if you read Ecclesiastes with that structure, it helps make sense of Ecclesiastes as a whole, where it's not just random things thrown together. It kind of fits that rubric. Now, the second thing I just want to briefly mention is something that I have long thought about with Ecclesiastes. And when I did my Hebrew and I was translating the Old Testament, when I got to Ecclesiastes, when I started translating Ecclesiastes from the Hebrew, I saw a whole bunch of stuff in Ecclesiastes that you can't see in English. For example, the word havel. If all you know is English, you read, meaningless, meaningless, or vanity, vanity, and that shapes how you view Ecclesiastes. But if you realize that word is breath, and therefore that helps you realize, hey, that's not just, he's not saying it's vain, he's not saying life is meaningless, life is fleeting, it's a breath. And you'll realize, hey, that's Abel's name. There's something contrasting, connecting with Genesis, and that's why a number of my questions have asked you to contemplate how it fits in with Genesis. There's a whole bunch of other things in Ecclesiastes, when you read it in Hebrew, that I think connect with Genesis. Where's my stuff here? Here it is. For example, if you read in English translations, talk about what is man doing this, when man does this. Well, the Hebrew word for man is Adam, Adam. So you have, what you see in Ecclesiastes in Hebrew is, what does Adam gain by seeking wisdom? That takes you all the way back to the Genesis 3 story. And there's talk about Adam, there's talk about wisdom, there is talk about breath, death, dust to dust, seeking knowledge, frustration in your toil. When you see that in Ecclesiastes, I think the kind of like the backdrop to Ecclesiastes' discussion about wisdom and the purpose of life, I think in the backdrop, the back curtain, so to speak, is the story in Genesis 3 of Adam and Eve reaching out for wisdom in the wrong way, and when they reach out for something more, all they get in return is death and frustration. And I think, therefore, Ecclesiastes, by using Genesis 3, it sees Genesis 3 as kind of like that's the plight of humanity. It's not just one guy back then and there. Adam, as I swore, Adam, that's humanity. That is our lot in life. And so Ecclesiastes is kind of contemplating the human condition. In that sense, we are all like Adam and Eve in the story of Genesis 3. We all are reaching out for wisdom, seeking understanding, and we all fall short, and we all find frustration and toil, and that's the human condition. And that is what Ecclesiastes is contemplating. Now, I can't go into all the details. You've been reading it. I've been enjoying reading your your thoughts and stuff on it. But I would say, if you go into Ecclesiastes further, if you understand how it is structured, that helps you understand it. But also, go through it again as you read, and kind of read it with that Genesis 3 in the background, and realize it's really trying to wrestle with the human condition by talking about what it talks about. But in the background there's that story of Genesis 3 there. I think it'll add to your understanding. So, okay, I just wanted to make that short video for you. Hopefully that helps. After Ecclesiastes, we'll keep moving on, and we'll just keep plugging along. All right, thanks.